Hey, what's up, Dean? It's Performance. We're at the shop and we are on Nitrous S10. And you can see there's a cylinder head, the valve cover, all the valve train, other valve cover, and you can see it's like a milkshake. So everything's pulled back apart. Yesterday I was filling the cooling system and I put about 3 gallons in it, and I for the life of me could not see it in the radiator and thought, that's a lot of coolant. So I started the truck. It kind of got up to temp and it felt like it was just constantly struggling. Added another gallon and thought, there's no way. Pulled the dipstick and sure enough, the entire inside of the motor is like a milkshake. And you can see it's pretty full. So I shut it off. I had originally thought it was the intake. These Speedmaster intakes, they're, you know, a cheaper intake. And I know on LS's I've had a lot of trouble with their like qualifier series intake, not seating like along the runner. And one of them, actually the whole runner's cut like on an angle, like they machined the whole thing off and you can see the intake ports. So I thought originally that it was the back of the intake leaking into the lifter valley. I pulled the intake, called Jeff. He found an intake, a Victor Jr. sitting over there. And then as I was kind of cleaning everything up, I noticed in the back over here, you see how there's like a flat spot, that it was like a river running down. So I looked, and what I found was this is the Molly or male or whatever you want to call it, cylinder head gasket. So you can see that big square hole. There's a coolant passage there, and that's an oil drain back. It's not a bolt hole, that's a bolt hole. That is the oil drain back. So they literally are in the same port on this gasket. And what it also does is, you can see in the block, that little hole down there is the coolant. No, it doesn't want to. I don't need it to go all the way on. There. That's the coolant, and then it leads right into the lifter valley. So it was literally just puking the coolant into the engine. And vice versa, I'm sure it was putting oil in the coolant, whatever you want to call it. So those are no good. Everything came back apart. I stayed late last night, got everything apart, pretty well cleaned up. I gotta wipe down the surfaces on the heads, I gotta wipe out the valve covers, and then clean the bottom of the intake, just make sure it's clean. Get all the RTV and stuff off of it. And then I went ahead and grabbed a set of Felpro 501 SD, and you can see that corner, that's the oil drain back and that's the coolant. So they separate them in this gasket. I use these, I don't know the thickness on these ones, I could probably look it up, but it's 501 SD. So I'm gonna use these on this. It has a little bit better of the material rather than the blue paper, and then it's got these little extra seals. New intake gaskets, so they should be right. So I'm gonna get back to putting the heads back on. I'm gonna wipe everything down again in the block, on the cylinder heads and stuff. Get the head gaskets put back on there. Get the heads torqued down. And then I'll do the valve rockers, valve adjustment and everything, and maybe I'll come back on the valve adjustment and show you like how I do them for small block Chevy, and believe it applies to big block Chevys as well. I don't do a lot of big block Chevys, but I will come back and update on that. All right, so made good progress. I've got the heads are on, torqued down. I put the headers on. They're all resealed, tightened. I got all the push rods in. All the rockers are on. I already adjusted all of the passenger side, and I came from the back all the way to the front. I left number one. Now, the way my engine builder explained to me is to do your intake and your exhaust. So your intake side, you turn the motor over till your exhaust valve just starts to lift, and then you adjust your intake, which I already have it to the point where the exhaust is just starting to crack open. So I'll try and do this with one hand. So basically on the balancer bolt in the center, and all the plugs are out to make it a little bit easier to turn over. But if you can see, somehow you can see how that exhaust rocker's gonna just start poking up. Right there, see how it came up just a hair. So now I go to the intake. I'm not gonna be able to do this, but so what I do is I use my fingers in the valley and I spin the push rod. You can see it spinning, and then you adjust the nut till you just feel the push rod touch, like get just a hair snug. Let me see, maybe Jeffrey's motor does not want to hold the phone. All right, something like that. So right there, I could feel it snug. And then I take my wrench, and I always try and put it like 90 degree to the motor, and that gives me a reference. And on these, the cam and the rockers are quarter of a turn to half a turn. So I go just a hair past quarter, and then you tighten down the set screw in the center, make sure it's good and tight. Now for the intake valve, it's almost somewhat opposite. I mean the exhaust valve to adjust. You have to go all the way Okay, see the intake valve is now opening. So you go all the way until it's maxed and just starts to drop. So right there it just started dropping. The same thing. Right there. Okay, so the lifters are actually not pumped up, which makes it a little difficult, but that's what you have to be careful for, is that you're not sinking that into the lifter and still spinning it. So that should be all of them. I'm going to rotate it through one full, well it's actually 4 strokes, but I'm going to go 2 full rotations. Oh, and the phone drops. Because everything's moving. Let me see. Maybe you can see from up there. No, you can see the firewall. Maybe you can see from there. Hopefully you can see. Okay. So I went 2 or 3 rotations. Everything looked good. You don't feel any valves clacking pistons. And all of this, and it's 1 o'clock. So I got down here, I think about 10:15. So I got everything cleaned up, put together. I'm gonna slap the valve covers on it, get the intake back on it, get everything hooked, get everything hooked back up to it. I did take, I had to drain it anyways because it's got the gooey goopy in it. So I had to get rid of it anyways. But it makes it easier to turn the balancer. You're not trying to fight in a little spot. So yeah, I mean, pretty much I just got to stick everything back together. Not everything, what's left back together. Intake valve covers, distributor. I'll set the distributor back in there, which I'll do right now while the valve covers are off. I'll get top dead center on number 1, and then I know where to stab my distributor in. Steering rod, I'll shove that back on. That's super simple. And then, I mean, it's pretty much back to where we were yesterday. Well, hopefully a little farther along than we were yesterday with not having the wrong head gaskets on there. So I should be able to put the water in it. Not like tap water, but it's like a deionized or purified, whatever it is, like purified water. So it doesn't have any iron content. You want to get water that doesn't have iron content, so it doesn't rust or block and make everything filthy. And then I'm going to use the Hypercool, and I'm going to see how that works with the electric pump and the fans being wired as one. Also did yesterday, these are the headlight, high beam and low beam. So I cut them, and I actually remembered that I had a fuse box here with open relays. There's actually 3 open relays. So I'm gonna do these 2 here. I'm probably gonna do like high beam, low beam, or low beam, high beam, whatever it is. And then I'll label them. See, that one's fan 1, over there is sniper. So each relay, I labeled each one for them. So yeah, I mean, I gotta move forward with that. And then the rest of the wiring on it, I also added to the dash. I did a like a block off panel for the radio and the little like cubby that's there. And then this is a gauge that I got off my buddy with the airboat. It's an oil pressure gauge. So that's the only thing this is missing as far as vitals would be the oil pressure. So we got that gauge in there, and that's also the sending unit that's in the back. I changed it out from the OEM one, and I put the one that came with the gauge in there. So, and then the wire runs inside. I'll have to wire that in as well. So probably gonna end off with firing this up, so that I'm at least hopefully ahead of where I was yesterday with no milkshake factory over here. So I will finish getting everything together, and I'll come right back. Okay, so I ended up I put the truck up in the air and pulled the drain plug to get the milk out. So got a 5-gallon bucket. You can see it's starting to separate itself, but it's almost 5 gallons in there, and then I only use this for the oil filter. So that's draining, and while that was up in the air, I went ahead and mounted the kill switch in the frame as close as I could to the battery, and then I took that 1/4-inch rod and it bends up and then back straight to get over the frame rail. It's not mounted in there, it's just kind of stuck in there for it. Oh, that's my head. It goes behind the shock mount, and then it bends out and bends back straight to go through the bumper, which I unbolted and dropped a little bit just so the rod could stick out for now. And the handle on this kill switch is like pot metal. Real crappy, like cast aluminum or something, whatever it is. It basically melted when I tried to weld like a flat lever to it to attach that Heim joint. So instead what I did was I took like a I think it's 1/4 inch, might be 3/8, might be a 3/8 plate of aluminum, and I cut a little tab off of it. I drilled a hole in the center to go over the kill switch, like whatever stem, if that's what you want to call it. And then I drilled a hole through the bottom all the way through that hole, and I threaded it 1/4 20 to put a set screw in there. So now that set screw sets on the flat spot that's on that stem of the kill switch. There's 2 flat spots, so it's kind of like a sort of like a double D, if you want to call it that shape. So it slides over, and then I put the screw out here to hold it from falling off, and I Loctited the set screw up in there. So now the Heim joint will be able to kind of wiggle around and move, but you know, pulling and pushing on the Heim joint, it works. And then what I'm gonna do to make it somewhat adjustable, I have this tube that I'm gonna cut sections of it to slide over the rod. So like right here, probably I'll slide a piece, like 3 or 4 inch piece over the rod, and then I'll weld a little standoff off the frame to that tube, and that'll hold the rod in place. And I'll do it in various spots down the frame, probably like 3. I'm thinking 1 over there, 1 somewhere up in there or in there. I don't really, man, I'm not worried about it bending here because it's behind the shock tower. So I might put 1 here, not 100%. And then I gotta put 1 back here, as far back as I can actually. I'm gonna put it, and that'll hold the rod up in there. And then when it sticks out this way, when you push it, it's sliding through that tube, and that'll keep the rod from wanting to walk back and forth. And then on the end of the rod, I'm gonna do the weld on Heim sleeve like that, or on the end of this tube, I'll weld this to here. That way it gives me the threaded bung for that Heim joint. And I'll just cut, I don't know, maybe 1 inch of this ish, 1.5 inches. And then I can thread this on, and I can also, excuse me, I can also put the lock nut right through the table. Oh boy. I can put the lock nut on it, and that way it locks the Heim in place. And then I'll weld this tube to that rod. The other ones are guides, and then this little end will be welded right onto the rod. So that way there it's adjustable in a sense. So if we need to adjust it, I have to figure out a knob for the back. And what I'm thinking I had the other day, I think that is steel there. Yeah, that's a chunk of steel. That's it. There it is. So I have this block of aluminum. So I think what I'm going to do is take probably 2/3 of it, turn it down to maybe like 1 inch. Oh, I had this block here, this 1.25 inch one. So I might do it with this one. And then I'll round over the end, and I'll round over the inside of it a little bit, and that'll give it like a pull lever. And then where I machine down to slide over the rod, I'll drill in and do another set screw, or I'll pin it. Probably a set screw. Probably be a set screw that I attach to the rod I mean, it's a thin rod, but I can put a flat spot in the rod for the set screw to set against. And that, like, if it's a notch in the rod, basically, the set screw will sit in the notch, and that'll keep the handle from coming off or going forward. So I could do that. That would probably be the better way of doing it. But yeah, I mean, I got up there, everything's adjusted, the alternator's back on, belt is tight, distributor's in and set, the sniper's all plugged back in. I also, you can barely see it through the grill against the firewall. The solid state relay for the nitrous is mounted on the firewall. Yeah, so tomorrow Saturday, unfortunately, I will be back down here. I'm gonna let this drain overnight. I'll leave the truck sitting on the locks. I'll let that drain overnight. Then this way, when I get here tomorrow, that should be pretty cleaned out. It'll have to get oil change. I got some cheap oil now and a cheap filter that I'll run it on. A couple of heat cycles I'll get in it. Try and cook some of the moisture out of the oil. And then I will, before he takes it, I will change the oil one more time. We'll see what that oil looks this oil, the cheap oil, we'll see what that looks like. If it's got a little bit of a milk to it, then I'll get it, I'll have him bring, or I'll get whatever, I'll get another cheap oil change, run it through a few more heat cycles, and then that'll be that, and we'll change it and put a good oil in it. So for now, it's late, it's almost dark out, so I'm gonna head home. Appreciate you watching. Do me a favor, hit the thumbs up, hit subscribe, doesn't cost you anything, and leave a comment. Appreciate it. Have a good day.